Well, Priya, thank you so much for being here.
Of course, of course. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm so excited to have you here. It's such a small world in some ways, and the fact that I got connected to you. So I just wanted you to maybe share with the audience really high level what you do, and then perhaps we could go back to the journey that how you arrived at what you do now.
Yeah, totally. So I'm a council member in the city of Carlsbad. It's a city I grew up in, and I really enjoy doing that level of public service. I just got reelected in the last couple of months, so this is my second term. I do hold many leadership positions in the local governance space. So I'm our division president for the League of California Cities. I'm the chair of the Women's Caucus for the League of California Cities. Also a chair of a policy committee for that as well. So very heavily involved in making sure that Carlsbad's voice is being heard at every level. And then also as on, professionally, of course, that's also my profession, but my day job, because, I want to make sure I'm staying involved in public health. I'm a public health professional. So I actually work in the violence prevention space, specifically in gun violence prevention. I work for Everytown for gun safety. So that's my day job. So I do a lot. I've done a lot, whether it's been in the academic research or corporate setting, and obviously most recently in the nonprofit setting. So prior to coming to Everytown doing gun violence prevention, I was in the domestic violence space doing domestic violence work. And so that's kind of what, I'm currently doing, but then also obviously serve as a council member. So yeah.
That's so much that you're involved in. It sounds, you were telling me before we hit record that you wake up really early.
I do. I wake up generally between 4 and 5 a.m. So I can start my day. I tend to take the morning to do my workout. That's my time to myself. And then, start the day so that I can start it kind of having had the opportunity to just be with myself, talk, think through things, or just not think through things and just have like an empty mind, hopefully, in terms of just being able to then be present throughout the day. So definitely I enjoy being able to have that morning routine. And then I start off with my meetings usually around 6:37 in the morning, and then it kind of goes throughout the day. So yeah.
But I'm so glad you brought up this idea of staying grounded and present and really taking time for yourself. That is something that I touch upon almost daily, especially working professional women
Yeah.
have children. How did that practice get you through or help support you during the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think during that time, obviously, we couldn't go for classes or anywhere. So a lot of it was just either going for walks on my own with my dog. I have a dog. At the time, I did not have my son. I actually became pregnant during the pandemic. But a lot of it was just being able to take either the time to go for a walk or work out at home, and just have that 1 hour window or two, 1 or 1.5 hour window where I was actually doing, whether it was walking or working out, or actually sometimes even going and getting tea and just shutting myself off from the world and being able to have that space for just myself and things that I enjoy, was definitely something that helped. I think during that time, I realized a lot about self-care. I would say that I have not been the best at, self-care. I keep myself very busy, whether it's during this time or previously. And I think during the pandemic, it was almost like a forced shut down for everyone, right? Like everyone kind of had to sit down, figure out, okay, what is it that will help me get through this? Or what is it that will allow for me to continue to take care of myself during this time where I'm isolated and not being able to connect with folks? But there were different ways you still could connect with people. But I think it also gave a lot of us time to reflect on ways to do self-care for ourselves. And for me, it was, okay, make sure I'm intentionally taking that time every day, whether I have, an hour in the morning or not, to at least like during the day, for even a few minutes, take some time to at least go for a walk or, make myself tea or whatever it might be that I know that I get joy from, to be able to like continue to have space to continue to serve others, whether it's my family, friends, or even the public. So I think it's definitely an important tool for all of us to have, to be able to be hopefully high functioning whenever we're in our spaces. So yeah.
And you had a child during that period.
Yes, I did. And he's turning 2 tomorrow. So yes.
Oh, happy birthday to him.
Thank you.
So what's so fascinating is that you are a native somewhat of Carlsbad, and
Yeah.
now son is being raised here. So tell us a little bit about how that feels.
Yeah, I think, definitely. So I grew up here. I went to elementary, middle, and high school here. And it's really cool to have seen how Carlsbad's changed over the time that I've grown up. And of course, now as an adult and a parent of a child, it's really interesting to see, how he's going to have the same opportunity that I had to live in this amazing town. Obviously, it's much different in the sense that it's much bigger than when I was a kid. I do think it's a lot more diverse since I was young, and then definitely in general, I think there's a lot of different opportunity. Of course, there were always opportunities here. That's why we came to Carlsbad. But I think there have been more growth opportunities in general in terms of like education or jobs, all these different things that have kind of shown up. And so for me, it's exciting. And obviously I won't know if he's going to decide to stay here once he's an adult. But I think that from what I see, a lot of people end up coming back if they have left, because it is a space that really you can truly like raise your family here, have a job here, hopefully get a house here and raise your family here. And so I'm hoping that he'll share that love of the city. I think he already loves the city, but as he grows, I hope that he'll share that love and want to stay here alongside us. So yeah.
Yeah, my son is 10. Oh, yes, he's 10 now and born and raised in Carlsbad. And we're always telling him there's nothing better out there.
Right?
That's wonderful that you have that perspective on a town that you love so much. And there are so many, I would say, platforms that you seem to have really given a voice to. Maybe you can shed some light on some things that are important to you.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, like during my time, I've had the opportunity to talk to so many people in the community and folk, whether it's organizations, going door to door or just listening to feedback, whether it's via email or my office hours or phone calls. And I think, whether it's Carlsbad or across the state, obviously housing and homelessness is like our number one issue that everyone is trying to figure out. How do we create affordable housing? How do we make sure people that are experiencing homelessness have the services that they need in order to be able to also thrive in our communities? Then of course, sustainability is a huge one. So the environment, how do we make sure that we can fight climate change, at the same time, continue to be good stewards of the environment and protect these beautiful spaces that we have here in our own city for our future generations to be able to enjoy. And then I would say economic development is huge as well. I mean, obviously, like I mentioned earlier, we're a huge sector. I mean, our gross regional product is over $15 billion. So, we have 6 different industry clusters. People continue to want to bring their businesses here to Carlsbad, but that also means that there are more jobs here in Carlsbad, and that hopefully gives opportunity to folks that are living here to work here and also have the ability to enjoy, their lives here and specifically in the city. So I think those are definitely the top 3 that not only the council's focused on, but I definitely am very much focused on. And as somebody, that is Indian American, I think diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that's really important to me as well. I know we focused on it in the past few years, making sure that our organization, the City of Carlsbad, actually has a diversity, equity, and inclusion manager. We didn't have one before. She focuses on making sure our organization feels safe, respected, included, but also figures out how all of our projects will make sure that they're being looked at from a lens of DEI and making sure that, again, all of our projects are thinking of all the impacts that it would have on different communities. So those would be like the top, like high level priorities, I would say, that I'm interested in wanting to make sure that we continue to prioritize in the city.
Sounds like throughout all of those platforms you just mentioned, which I'm passionate about as well, the service-oriented perspective is there. And maybe you can share how perhaps your upbringing may have influenced that approach to life.
Yeah, definitely. And thanks for the question. I would say that, for me, a lot of it comes from my family. My family very much is, and even now, they're the type of people where they will give without expecting anything in return. And I think that's the true level of service, right? Like, is when you serve, you're serving for the cause of serving. You're not serving to expect that you will receive something back for what you do. And I think that as public servants, I would hope that everyone's intent is such that when you come in, you're expecting to serve and you expect that that's what you will do, and that there's no expectation of how people will reciprocate or return your service towards them. And so I think for me, just being able to witness how my parents, obviously they immigrated here from India, they built themselves up to be, the really engaged and amazing citizens that they are and people that they are. And obviously they also instilled in us that same level of service. My brother is the same way. I'm the same way. We really wanted to be, how do we provide what we have to offer to the community without feeling like we deserve to be treated differently because of that service. And so I think that's the mentality I come in with. I very much want to lead with kindness. My parents are always telling us that we need to lead with kindness. I think it's one of the things that everyone learns, right? Is like, treat people with respect and ensure that you're treating them the way you'd want to be treated. And so I think regardless of opinion, I know these days, everything is hyper, very, very, either it's this way or that way. And I think that is not the best way to approach things. As much as we can, we need to have conversation, open dialogue, be respectful of different opinions, and also try and figure out ways that we can work together. I think that's like a life skill for every profession. It's not just my profession. It's a life skill in every single one, because that's how you get things done, right? Like regardless of what industry you're in, you will always have opposing viewpoints. But that's, I think, how you have innovation, is that you're able to then come up with ideas based on those conversations of how you can move things along, so that most of whether it's your client or the industry or even the public can actually benefit from what you're putting forward. And so I would say that those are the types of things, definitely, like the kindness. How do you collaborate? How do you work with people? How do you serve? How do you give back? And then how do you show up, are things that my parents taught me. And and one of the biggest core values, I would say, that I don't want to leave out is ethics and morality and being like a person with integrity. And I think that's a really big thing for me, is like, I am always truthful with people. I will always tell people how it is, even if it's not what they want to hear, so that they know exactly where I stand. So that way, there are no surprises. It's actually just me being who I am, and I'm being genuinely who I am. So yeah, I would say those would be the elements. Yeah.
Those elements are wonderful. I mean, all the characteristics of kindness and leading by example. And you are cognizant of the fact that the innovation comes through communication, which has often been, I would say, the most challenging part for the last few years of, particularly during the pandemic. There was such a polarity in people's thinking.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the communication piece somehow got lost in the last few years, not locally, but I would say just in general, right? Like you watch people and how it's become so hyper polarized on whatever it is. And I think that if we just communicated, we would see that we have a lot more in common with people than actually differs. And then obviously, if there are those differing viewpoints, how do you move along together? And I think that's the piece that we forget. And if there's a pathway forward, I mean, there always is, right? Like there's always a pathway forward. It's just how you choose to show up and how you choose to address it. So.
And what's one of the things that you feel like you witnessed as in being in the position that you're in, where applying those principles truly saw an outcome that helped a lot of both sides or all sides?
Yeah. There definitely have been, examples of that. I would say one would be that we had an issue with there were going to be folks that were going to lose their jobs in the hotel industry during the pandemic. Obviously, Carlsbad's a huge tourism town, and there was an ask from multiple areas saying, hey, we're going to lose our jobs. Is there a way for us to save our jobs? So we worked with hand in hand with the hoteliers, with the workers. And I worked with somebody who wouldn't necessarily have the same opinion on this to figure out a solution to be able to make sure that the impact of us trying to help save jobs wouldn't also hurt the businesses that were also hurting during that time. And we actually came up with an ordinance that actually was supportive and was supported by everyone, and it was really strong. And it passed with a 4-1 vote, and I think that's great. We were able to get a majority of folks to understand while we discussed it during that public forum that it was something that truly mattered. We were able to obviously communicate it, the economics of it, the humanity aspect of it, all of the different pieces that really may have mattered to each person. And then when we voted, thankfully, it did save those thousands of jobs, and it also was able to work with those the hotels that would have been impacted by that. So I think overall, initially, and that was a 3-week time frame. I had 3 weeks to do that, and in 3 weeks to have to set up with our biggest hotels, talking to each of them, talking to the workers to understand what their issues were. I was also pregnant, so it's and it was so trying to figure out how do we get all of this done in a way that again everyone would benefit, and I think we had a successful outcome. If you talk to everyone felt like they were part of the process. They got to be part of the conversation. And as difficult as it was, because you could have just done it however you wanted to, but I wanted to make sure all parties that would be impacted were part of that conversation. And I think we actually came up with, everyone says it was one of the best solutions that they've seen. So that's definitely an example I'm proud of, and glad that we were able to make sure that people weren't unemployed during a time of so much uncertainty.
And that time was definitely not challenging, but it was unknown. Things were unfolding as you go.
Totally.
And I can't imagine being pregnant during these uncertainty times, and yet you were so level-headed.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, it was being pregnant during a pandemic was really interesting for sure. I think, for those that we obviously know others that have children that are around my son's age. So clearly they also were pregnant during the pandemic. And I can imagine how folks felt, because I felt the same way. You can't see your friends, you couldn't see your family, but you obviously had your direct folks in your household. So I had my dog and my husband. And I think definitely just being able to, again, going back to that mindfulness piece, doing things for ourselves, being able to take care of ourselves, whatever was something that brought us happiness or joy, making sure we were focusing on that, at least if we could every day, but if not, at least once or twice a week, making sure we were doing that, I think definitely allowed for us to continue to be able to serve in our respective capacities. So, yeah.
And through that entire process, the success story you just described, I imagine you can now use that as a case study for other similar scenarios.
Definitely. I mean, it was one of those things that I didn't know what the outcome would be, but I was hoping for the best outcome, right? And I was trying to make sure we were laying the groundwork for it. And you never know, right? It's until it happens, especially with anything in the political arena, the day of is when you know what's going to happen. And so I'm just glad that, again, we were able to have those conversations and make sure that we were able to come up with a solution that really was beneficial for everyone.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that story. And I do particularly enjoy that, knowing that even if the challenges were there in terms of maybe polarity or opposing views, you took time to bring in other people into the conversation. Like you said, you could have just implemented a solution.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the thing, is that people forget, and that's what you witness, whether it's here or across the country. A lot of times people will just want to implement their solution and not necessarily think of the impacts of what it truly means to put forward whatever, if it's a policy or, whatever else. And I think really thinking about, okay, if somebody didn't share my viewpoint, how would they feel? And also trying to figure out, okay, what entities, what organizations, what individuals would be impacted by this policy? And have I talked to all of those entities? Have I understood where their reservations are, or if they're excited, have I understood why they're passionate about this, so that I can then take all of that information, and if I am not already considering it, take it, consider it, and then include it in my deliberation and process. And so I think not everyone does that because everyone feels that they already have the answer, but we all don't always have, none of us always have the full answer about anything, right? I think we always have to do our due diligence, our research, our homework to understand any sort of issue fully. Obviously, we all have studied a specific, thing in college or, whatever else in education or in life. We've learned something, taken a certification class, and we have some level of expertise, but that doesn't mean that you know everything about everything. It still means you're learning constantly. And I think that's the thing that most people tend to forget. And for me, I know I'm going to be a constant learner in life, and change is always the only constant, right? Like that's what everyone says. And in this particular case, it's so important to remember that in order for us to continue to move forward, change is really going to be the only constant, and that things are always changing in every single policy aspect. And we need to be mindful of all of those different things and understand that, what we may have thought would have worked a couple of years ago may not work anymore based on how law has shifted, what kind of court cases have been tried, what policies have already been shot down, so all of those different things that we have to truly think about and consider, but then also all of the different stakeholders that are involved, so that we're actually making a truly level-headed decision versus just something that is pushed forward by our own personal views. So
yes, and that's true. You've a couple of times alluded to saying that all feels, regardless of whether you're in politics, and that is true. I've worked in corporate and technology space, and time and again, often I would share that I pay attention to history. Because in the world of technology, sometimes you need to have these conversations on which direction are we going.
Yep.
If you don't look at the history and talk to the different stakeholders, you might be only seeing one aspect.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And sounds like your parents had such a strong influence. Were there any other role models that also may have indirectly influenced you?
I don't think so. I mean, I think a lot of it is just like the environment I grew up in, obviously. So like my family, and I think just like being, obvious for me, like I really have looked at what others have done and tried to learn from it, but I don't know if they've necessarily been role models. It's more just watching and learning from others in terms of like the types of service that they've done, whether it was in politics or just philanthropy or other places, and trying to like, of course, learn from their successes, but also learn from their mistakes. I think that's a huge piece, right? Is like, how do we make sure that if there are opportunities for improvement, how do you continue to improve upon them? So I think that's like what in leadership is really important, is to make sure that, you're learning, especially, of course, like I've heard that from folks that are in leadership positions, like obviously learn from people's success, but also learn from where they could have done something in a different way, and I think that's what I always try to look at and try to utilize as like ways that I can continue to shape myself as I continue on this path.
I do like the fact that you mentioned a couple of times that change is a constant.
Yeah.
Recognizing that change is a constant helps us mindfully be aware of where you can continually grow.
Yeah. Yeah, I think definitely, I would say for me that I knew change was a constant, but like actually internalizing it, gosh, it must have been, I don't even remember, 15 years ago, maybe, that I finally realized, okay, I need to actually take this in and really think about it that way, because things were, I mean, I was in college, so things were constantly changing. When you go into college, it's such a different world. You're learning a lot more, you're being exposed to a lot of different things in the world. So I think just being able to internalize and learn, like realize, yeah, change is actually the only thing that truly is constant, and everything else does shift around you, whether it's your life, your friends, whatever else what you actually enjoy doing might shift throughout your life, and so I think it's just one of those things where, for me, I realized very early on, like, public health and public service was something that I always liked. And I guess for me, like, that's also thankfully been a constant, is I really like to be part of service and helping people. I had wanted to be a doctor, and then it shifted to public health. But I think definitely the change is the only constant, is something that my husband continuously mentions. And I think that was where, like, when he and I met and he mentioned it, I was like, I wonder if he's actually right about that. Like, even though I know this, now hearing it from someone and internalizing it, contextualizing it with everything that goes on, it does actually make sense. So I try very hard to, like, remind people of that as well. Like, as maybe folks are going through a harder time, or, something is coming up where it's a more challenging time for them in their life, just reminding them that, to be graceful with themselves, but also reminding them, hey, like, change is the only constant. And as challenging as it may be now, it'll change, and it'll be different. So.
And changes, making that concept internalize, that takes a lifetime sometimes. we get into these patterns, or we get into routines, and those routines or rituals are there, like you were mentioning, having your time to go for a walk, or have tea. Yet those rituals sustain us, but sometimes they can trip us up, because we think, okay, I like this, why does it have to change?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, there are times where I don't get to do my workout or my walk at the same time, like at the time that I would prefer, but I know that I will get it done at some point during the day. And if you don't, that's okay. That's also part of your day-to-day. You're having to navigate so many other things. So as long as you're taking care of yourself at some point and giving yourself, time to, like, regenerate, then that's a plus. So
And that's words of wisdom for, I would say, particularly women. Sometimes we mentioned this in the very beginning, the self-care element sometimes drops off. I imagine, as a mother of a 2-year-old,
yes,
you've got a lot going on.
It does drop off sometimes. And I think that's when, for me, especially at the end of the week, I can tell the days that were a little bit more challenging for me versus the days where I was like, okay, like, even though there was a lot going on, I was able to manage. And that is because of the self-care aspect. Like, if it does end up falling off, I make sure I can prioritize it either the next day or in the next couple of days, so that I can recharge and make sure that I'm able to get through. Like, it's really more for me, right? Like, I know it's more to make sure that I have the energy and the capacity to continue to serve everyone, because you have to be able to take that time to regenerate, because serving others does take energy. And obviously, as parents, I'm sure a lot of people can relate. And I think that it's really important for us to make sure that we're also taking care of ourselves so that we can take care of others.
That's so true. I'm so glad that you were able to give that insight. I know there are women who often forget, so it's something that is a reminder for all of us.
Yeah, definitely.
So in terms of your role in leadership around you, you have your own kind of, I say, approach and philosophy on self-care and leadership and wisdom. How do you see others around you incorporating mindfulness that are also part of the solution to helping the public?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and if I can clarify the question, you're asking if folks that are in this space, how they also practice mindfulness?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, I would say that I've noticed, some of my colleagues like to surf, for instance, so they go and surf. Some will actually also do either some running, some yoga, meditation, a lot of different things that I think, or even just spending time with family. I know, like, mindfulness or can be different for everyone. And so I think I've definitely seen people prioritizing either self-care for themselves, so going and again doing something that they truly enjoy doing. So that could be like, for me, it's doing circuit training, you know, and being able to do like really intensive cardio workouts. And for others, it might be like surfing, biking, you know, and I've definitely seen people in this space that really truly enjoy like cycling, biking, you know, a lot of active things that I've noticed a lot of people like to do. And then of course, like yoga and meditation is something that I know my mom does every day, and it definitely encourages me to do, and something that I'm trying to incorporate. You know, there was at least a couple of years where I did yoga almost every day. But I have definitely wanted to make sure I pick up the practice of at least meditating. It is a more challenging one for me personally, but I know that it definitely does wonders. I mean, when I was doing yoga for like 2 years straight, it was definitely helping me center myself even more so, even though I already have my own version of my mindfulness. I think it definitely helps center you because you're focusing just specifically on the different elements of movement and, you know, what it does for your body. So
that's wonderful. I'm glad you have like that holistic approach to self-care.
Yeah, I try.
Yeah, and then, like you said, you have to have some grace.
Yeah.
If you can't do it every day, that's okay, but you'll get back into weaving it into your routine.
Totally. Yeah.
Well, is there any other parting words of wisdom that you have for those who are aspiring to be in more leadership roles? And what is your vision for Carlsbad 10 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, so maybe I'll start off with the vision and then switch back to the words of wisdom. But I would say, you know, in 10 years, I really hope that we've addressed some of the issues we talked about earlier, whether it's with regards to affordable housing and homelessness. I do hope that we've created more opportunities for folks that are starting out here in Carlsbad to actually have the opportunity to own a home. That's definitely a goal of mine, is for, you know, whether it's millennials or seniors or whoever might be looking for more of a starter home, because right now our median home prices are $1.4 million. That's a really high number for a lot of people, even if they do have a dual income household. And so I think just being able to make sure that we have affordability for folks that are investing in our communities. It could even look like our police officers or firefighters or teachers, people that actually serve within the community, usually are actually driving into our communities to serve our community. So I hope that we can achieve that goal of making sure people that serve in the community, and also those that are actually working in our community and would like to have the opportunity to live here, have the ability to do so. With regards to homelessness, hopefully making sure that we've reduced that number. We've gotten folks permanently housed, gotten them connected to those resources. We have just revamped our goal for that. So I'm hoping that we've addressed that. Definitely in the sustainability space, anything that we can do in terms of bluff stabilization, and obviously continuing to enrich our, doing beach nourishment and sand replenishment, and making sure that we're actually continue to have a beach, because with sea level rise, it seems like, at least in South Carlsbad, we're losing our beach. And so I've been pushing for that, just investment in that specifically, whether it's at the county or regional level, but also, you know, making sure from a city perspective, we continue to prioritize that and shifting away from fossil fuels, you know, shifting away from all of that and actually having other modes of transit. So I do hope that we can continue to invest in making sure that we're prioritizing our environment and sustainability, and thinking of ways for folks to get around town that would also help alleviate some of the greenhouse gas emissions. And then lastly, with economic development, obviously wanting to be, you know, a partner with the business community to continue to attract talent here, make sure that we continue to be a space, an innovator, and are on the map for one of the best destinations to want to stay for conducting business. So I think those would be things that I hope that we can continue to grow upon, achieve. And then in terms of words of wisdom, I always tell people, stay true to yourself. It can be a challenge. I know, because, you know, whether it's when you're young as an adolescent, or when you're in an industry that you've chosen to be in, or whatever else it might be, sometimes people will try and change you or pull you in a different direction. But I think what's been like something that I've always pushed to do is be myself and always be happy with who I am, because I think that those that like you for who you are, or those that know who you are, will always be there for you. And I think that's what continues to drive me to be the ethical, moral person that I am. And I think it will constantly drive the way that I serve and the way that I show up in any space that I'm in. And I think, when you're a leader, people look for that. They hope that they will have an ethical, a moral, a person that is true to themselves and is going to fight for what's right. And I think I would say that if you do that, people will be able to see that's like, you come in with a genuine heart and mind. And I think that's like definitely something that I'd want people to think about. Yeah, that would be it.
That's profound, though. That's exactly what we all need to learn. And it's, again, agnostic to your profession.
Yeah, definitely. I think regardless of profession, I think a lot of people admire that in whether it's their boss, their coworker, whoever it might be, just being able to know that a person's genuine. I mean, we value that in most of our relationships. And I think those are usually our strongest relationships. And I think that people are craving that, especially in the political world, that just having someone who's genuine, who wants to truly do what's best for the community, who wants to actually just like, be able to converse with people as if, we're just truly neighbors. So just being able to do that. So I think that's like, definitely, like you said, it doesn't matter what profession you're in. People just are craving that human aspect, being able to have those connections without worrying that a person is putting up a facade, and actually knowing that they're actually they're genuinely in that relationship, whatever it may be. So
yes, I love the idea that you zeroed in on being genuine, because that is a true virtue. And I know that many people that I know, they gravitate to that.
Yeah, 100%. I think I feel it too whenever I talk to people and if I see people that are genuine, you can tell that people gravitate towards them as well. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I loved every aspect of what you had to share, especially with platforms you're passionate about, and your upbringing and how that influenced you, and your vision, all of that. And I'm just so glad you're serving a town that I love so much.
Well, I am so thankful to be able to have this conversation and appreciate you inviting me today. I'm glad that we were able to connect. So
Me too. Hopefully we can meet in the near future.
Yeah, I hope so too. We'll have to grab tea.
We'll grab tea, yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And hopefully I can have you back in a future podcast.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah.
Have a great day.
Thank you.